so he could look at those confidential documents, Anderson.
All right, Randy, thanks very much. Back now with the panel. Joining the conversation as well as CNN political commentators Jason Miller and Angela Rye. He's a former senior communications advisor for the Trump campaign and was the communications director for the Trump transition. She's the former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Gloria, does this timeline make sense? I mean, is this unusual, this whole...
Yes. It's all very unusual, particularly since you have foreshadowing of this kind of information that is going to be revealed from the president and then Sean Spicer.
Right, the president said, well, we're going to be submitting something later on, and then Sean Spicer said, well, let's wait and see.
And then Devin Nunes showing up on the White House grounds, and you know, I was told today that this, by a source who's familiar with what Nunes was looking at, that the documentation was in control of the White House. So that's why he had to go there. And so, you know, you have to put one and one together and say, this is an effort to divert attention, to change the subject. Nunes may have very good reasons for complaining about the unmasking of names in intelligence and, you know, this incidental collection. And that's a legitimate thing to look into. But it is not what he is supposed to be looking into, which is the Russia investigation.
What it looks like is Trump tweeted something that had no grounding in fact. And so the White House and the head of the House Intelligence Committee had to spend days figuring out what's something that could sort of be a fig leaf that would justify what he said, even though it's not really what he said. And that's what this entire process was. And they turned to incidental collection as that fig leaf.
But even when he came out with what he said, it wasn't actually what Donald Trump had alleged.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's
Absolutely.
what's interesting.
Exactly.
But what was interesting in the timeline, of course, it ends with Donald Trump coming out and saying he's been vindicated. So it's this whole, like, just leading all the way up to this of him being vindicated, even though he wasn't vindicated. And so it was sort of this charade.
And Jason, I mean, first Chairman Nunes said that the story was about surveillance activities that he felt the president needed to be aware of. And then to Sean Hannity, he said that it was his duty to brief the president because he was, quote, taking a lot of heat in the news media. Does that seem odd?
I think that, I mean, look, I think the biggest surprise today is that Nancy Pelosi is still around. We haven't seen her in quite a bit, and so for her to jump in and...
But I guess, is it the chairman's job to protect the president from taking heat in the news media?
I think clearly Chairman Nunes saw something that really concerned him, and he brought it forward. I mean, look, the focus right now shouldn't be on the palace intrigue. TikTok, it should be on what exactly Chairman Nunes saw and what he was so concerned about that he brought to the president. And quite frankly, I don't understand why the Democrats are calling for Chairman Nunes to step aside. This is supposedly an investigation into alleged collusion between the campaign and some foreign entity before the election. Chairman Nunes had said very clearly this is something that was after the election, had nothing to do with Russia.
But it's looking for any context between, but this has nothing to do with Russia at all.
But that goes to my point, that it's such a political stretch. And quite frankly, as someone who's partisan, as a Republican, I'm glad to see the Democrats really overplay their hand here, and I think it'll be egg on their face.
Catherine,
well, for what it's worth, Nunes did tell Eli Lake of Bloomberg News that his source was an intelligence official, not a White House official, just to put that out there. Look, I think there was a far better way to handle this because he's in this situation. I think it actually is part of his job to investigate wrongdoing if he thinks it's there in the intel community as the House intelligence head. But because you're doing this other investigation, you do it in the cleanest way possible. You bring forth this information and you vet it in a very serious way, and that does not appear to be what's happened here. But I will say I have no chill about the idea that incidental information on any American citizen is sort of passed around like candy in a fun way within any administration. I do think that we give tremendous power to these entities, and as a libertarian on this issue, I just want to say that can be a problem. The Russia investigation is also an issue.
Mary Catherine, speaking of no chill, I don't have any either because we're talking about Donald Trump once again throwing a storyline. Instead of us talking about missing D.C. girls, instead of us talking about a white supremacist that killed a black man and had plans to kill more black people just because of who they were. Instead of us talking about the healthcare debacle, we're talking about something that didn't happen that your president can't even spell, TAP.
He's your president also.
No, I'm directing that to anybody else besides me because I still don't claim him. So I think that the bigger issue that I have, speaking of having no chill, is that if this would have been under the Obama administration, there would be no end to this. Barack Obama had to be the next best thing to Jesus. And here we are, just 2 months in and some change. And there is issue after issue. Maybe it's not Russian collusion, maybe it's collusion with the Intel Committee chair, but it's highly problematic. There are skiffs on the Hill that this chairman could have went to get the classified information that he needed to be briefed on.
But not to contain that information. He said that today.
I think that the bigger issue that we have here is the Intel Committee chairman all of a sudden has forgotten what procedures he needs to undergo to study and learn and or brief someone on classified.
But it's also interesting. I mean, there was at the beginning of last week this bombshell of a hearing where Director Comey makes the statement. And there was a certain amount of momentum to that.
Yes.
And then Chairman Nunes has made several unilateral decisions basically to cancel the public hearing, which was supposed to take place tomorrow, which was essentially going to advance this investigation. Said it was going to be a closed-door hearing, bringing back Comey and Rogers. That's now been canceled.
I mean, what it looks like to me is Schiff and Nunes negotiated a very wide scope for a serious investigation. And after Monday's hearing, Nunes said, wait a second, maybe I made a mistake here. These guys just killed us, killed Republicans. They're talking about a criminal investigation of Trump. Maybe I need to put the genie back in the bottle, because everything he has done since Monday has been to dismiss, put up a smokescreen about what happened at that hearing, and shut down the public part of the hearing.
We've got to just take a quick break. We're going to continue this conversation ahead. The United Front that House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes and Ranking Democrat Adam Schiff had been presenting. That is certainly history. Schiff now calling for Nunes to step aside. What Congressman Schiff told Phil Mattingly just before we went on air, plus the panel's take, and the White House spreading blame far and wide for the failed GOP health care bill. The blame game they're playing sounds familiar to some who've watched Donald Trump